There are moments when you're in so deep, it feels easier to just swim down. The house must have burned quickly, because the hatch opened of its own accord after just a few minutes. As I lay still on the ground, staring at the dark patch of sky above, I only had a single thought. Why? What's the purpose of getting up and facing the ruins of my life? Days, months, years of agonized rebuilding lay ahead of me, and no matter how hard I worked, I would never be the same again. My parents were dead. My childhood home was destroyed. I had no family, and several people were actively trying to kill me. The journey deeper into hell would begin with the struggle to extricate myself from this fucking bomb shelter. So why try? What was the argument against lying in place forever, wasting away as the smoky air licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, then fall upon its back, the suit, curled once about the house, and let me fall asleep? Because you're 22 years old, Olivia, and it's time to stop being afraid of things you're capable of doing. Shut the fuck up. I screamed as I flew to my feet, tears finally streaming. I'm sorry to yell at your memory, Daddy, but it's too much, so shut up. I caught the edge of the floor on my first leap, my slot slippers sliding against the wall as I strained my arms to do a single pull-up. I probably should have ditched the slippers, but I was committed to getting over the edge, and the adrenaline wouldn't let me stop as my muscles burned with white-hot rage, and I slowly poked my head over the top, reached out further, pushed my leg against the wall, hooked one knee over the lip, and rolled back into the wreckage of my life. I sobbed and choked in the ashes. Olivia, you'd be amazed what you can accomplish when you're really pissed off. Not now, Daddy. I gasped through sobs. It hurts too much to remember you right now. But it was in my father's memory that forced me to stand, turn around, and look for his charred corpse in the rubble. No, that was all me. Daddy knew me well enough to push just the first step. I was so disoriented that I didn't know where to begin. The cool night sky had replaced what was once my kitchen ceiling. But I stopped thinking and started feeling. I couldn't find him. The conscious part of my mind begged me not to look, because I didn't want to see the man who raised me, though so desecrated. But the unconscious piece, the stronger one, I knew that I had to be with him one last time. It didn't take long. I only needed about 19 seconds to have 13 boards aside, distantly impressed at my own strength. Then he was in front of me. The dwindling fright lit illuminated a barbecued skull leaning against the remains of a wall. His blackened skin hung in clumps like overcooked chicken. Both eyes were gone, but a single patch of intact flesh on his jaw still had a few burnt whiskers. Through a gasp of skin that used to be in his cheek, I could see his gold fillings, shiny and clean. I knelt down and touched his skull. The remnants of his skin slipped beneath my fingers, like a thick film giving way to the buttery pudding beneath. My mind was cracked like tectonic plates, sliding from their assumed plate to leave the landscape, changed so fundamentally that there was no hope of repair. I let it happen. We're born whole, and permanent damage is just another phrase for growing old. I promise that I'll always be your little shit, Daddy. I pulled out Doodles and tapped his face against the charred lips I was afraid to touch. We're kissing you goodbye. Then I stood. The man who shot my father had been right next to the hatch when my house burned. I guess he hadn't made it very far. The first sirens rang across open wreckage. As I waded through the ashes and dust, smoke rose like little chimneys were buried beneath each disgusting pile of my shattered life. I found him. This man was also reduced to a blackened skeleton, but most of his graying hair was still attached to his scalp. I rested one slipper against his rib cage, grabbed the base of his skull, and pulled. I met resistance at the cords of his vertebrae stretched, long thin strands like angel hair pasta that I assumed were nerves. I grunted, pulled harder, and his greasy, ashy skull popped into my hands. It was surprisingly light. I grabbed a fistful of his hair and let the skull dangle as I walked away from my house. I headed to the garage, which was still whole. Garages are where we keep the pieces of us we're afraid to label as garbage, long after that's what they've become. and there was only a particular piece of trash that I needed. I found it and walked back outside. The fire was strong enough to see the remains of his face as I lifted the skull to eye level. My dad bought me this when I was 8. I explained to him as I held up the Louisville Slugger. I wanted to say something wittier, something that would have made my dad proud, but there was nothing. We were broken. So I wordlessly swung the skull by its hair, threw it up into the night sky, and lifted the bat. I was angry as I swung, but I let that direct my focus instead of distracting from it. I hit the bastard's head so hard that it exploded on impact. The soft cracked on his face, followed only by the tinkling of 24 shattered teeth. I didn't cry at the double funeral, because tears are an expression of hope for healing. The parade of fellow mourners passed me like the world's saddest wedding line. I wish I'd had someone next to me. Half of the people were complete strangers. I realized how little we truly know of our parents' lives, and how much gets erased if they die without telling us. There's something incredibly depressing about returning to the motel in your hometown, and the impact is even stronger when two strangers are waiting for you inside. I've had enough creeps spying through my walls. I announced immediately upon seeing a man and woman waited by the bed, and I'm just walking in the door after burying my mom and dad, so I had precisely 0 fucks to give. Either leave or kill me, because I have a habit of burning things to the ground when my back is up against the wall. See? The woman asked the man. You owe me $100. He looked annoyed. We were just at your parents' funeral, Olivia. We met you in the line afterward. I didn't recognize them, though. To be fair, they looked so ordinary that they were completely forgettable. There were a time when fear could have driven such situation, but I looked inside and simply felt nothing. Sorry, I answered coolly. This day had been a bit of a blur. Is that why you didn't recognize half the crowd? The man asked, crossing his hands in front of him. My nostrils flared. Who are you? We worked with your father. The woman answered, grabbing a manila folder from the bed. You worked for the Transportation Authority of New. We worked for his real employer, not the one he lied to you about. My head spun. I didn't show it. I closed my eyes and tried to conjure a reason to dispute her claim, but I couldn't say anything. Something you can either know everything about or nothing. Yet you still have a close emotional connection to our organization. I opened the folder and looked over the first page. What's this mean? Every prospect has a code name, he explained. I ran my fingers across the word. Who chose Slugger? I asked quietly. The man squeezed his wrist. Once you start getting the answers, Olivia, there's no going back ever. I snapped the folder shut. Are you fucking kidding me? I shot back. Grabbing doodles from my purse, I looked at them each in turn until both were unable to meet my gaze. There's already no going back. I squeezed my doodles for comfort. Now tell me how we get started.